Welcome back to my browser game series, and in this video I'm going to be covering how to make Tic Tac Toe in a very basic way using JavaScript, and I'm really excited to get started with this. I described some of the algorithm from last time. Basically, we're just going to have the player enter a move, which will be either rock or the string R, P, or S, because that's how we're going to decide what the player chose. We're going to be using string variables, the letter R, P, or S for this. So basically we'll use the prompt function to get the player's input. Then, and this is why we covered random numbers, we're going to generate a random number from 1 to 3, and based off of that number, we'll have the computer pick one of these letters, and then we'll compare the result from there. So let's start with getting the player's move for Tic-Tac-Toe. And now would be a good time to give this a better title for our web page. So I'm just going to call it Tic-Tac-Toe game. There we go. Now let me get the player's move. Var player move, and this is the easier step than the computer move, is equal to prompt. This will give our user input. Enter R, P, or S, and a semicolon as normal. So this is the first step. This will get uncaught. What is this? What did I do? Oh, I forgot a quotation mark here, so I put one here. I have to put one here. And a hint that I did that was the fact that this parentheses and the semicolon was discolored. But when I fix that, we finally get this. We get this little box here, which will let the player enter a move there. So the player move is the easiest part of this whole project here. The next thing we need to do is get a computer move. I'm going to make a variable for it, computer move, and I'm going to start it as an empty string because we can't randomly generate a letter, but we can randomly generate a number and use that number to decide a letter using if statements. So both the if statements, or the conditionals tutorial video, and the random number video both go for this project here. So I'm going to generate a random number, var num, which is not the computer move, but what we're going to use to determine the computer move. The number is going to be a random number from 1 to 3. So I start with math.random. That will give me a random number from 0 to 0.9999. But if I can multiply this by 3 here, then I get a random number from 0 to 2.999. If I add 1 to this, now I'm going to get a random number from 1 to 3.999. And finally, if I use math.floor and put all of that calculation inside the function, and what I mean by inside the function is here's floor, its opening parentheses here, its ending parenthesis is here, so I put all of this in as an argument. Now when you do that, you get the random number between 1 and 3. And I talked about this in the last video. You're essentially just doing math. I don't need a comment. You're essentially just doing math.floor, math.random times your maximum plus 1. And you could also describe this as your minimum. So really, this is math.random times your maximum number plus your minimum number here. And that's an easier way of thinking of what we're doing here. And just to make sure that we did everything right so far, and I didn't make any more mistakes, I'm going to log the number that is randomly generated. So I'm just going to put Q, and we get a 2, rerun it, D, and I get a 1. So we are getting random numbers. So that was also a pretty easy step. Here's where we'll get a little bit harder. We now just got to assign the computer a move based off of those numbers. And the way I'm going to do it, I'm just going to have 1 correspond to rock, I'll have 2 correspond to paper, and I'll have 3 correspond to scissors, like that. So let's do some if statements. If the number that was generated equals 1, then computer move is going to be rock, like that. And remember, when you're using a comparison, when you're comparing one value to another, you use two equal signs. If you only used one, you would get an error here. So there's the first move. Let's add an else if statement. Num equals 2. Then the computer move is going to be equal to paper. And then finally, otherwise, the computer move is going to be scissors like that. And so now we have a computer move that's assigned, and we have a player move that's assigned. And so what we can do here is just console.log both of these different moves. And you could technically call the project quits there, but we want to do a little bit of a better job at that. So player move, and I'm going to add player move. I'm sure I taught that. You can combine a string with a variable to combine it all in one console log statement. Console.log computer move plus computer move, and just to make sure this is all working, let's run it. I'm going to choose rock. The player chose rock, the computer chose rock. So you can visually tell that this is a tie, but we're going to actually have the web page confirm this as the next step. I'm going to choose rock again. Computer chose scissors. I'm going to be real lazy, choose rock again. Computer chose rock. All right, so this is indeed working, and you could call it quits here. Let's add like some kind of victory message or so. And this is actually going to be by far the longest part of this tutorial, because this next part, we're going to compare all the different possible outcomes, and there are exactly 9 different outcomes. So we're going to compare all of them using if statements. So let's start with the scenario where player chooses rock. There's 3 possibilities. Either it's a tie, the player wins because the computer chose scissors, or the player loses there. But how do we check for multiple conditions? Like if I wanted to print this statement, or if I wanted to log the statement, you win, because, player chose rock and computer chose scissors. Well, how do I check that both the player chose rock and the computer chose scissors to where I can justify this statement here? Something really useful about these conditional statements is they can be put inside of each other. So I can start by saying if the player move equals rock. Well, let's check for a victory first. I can put another if statement inside of this if statement. If computer move is equal to scissors, then we can justify that statement. We have 2 conditions. The first one is player has to choose rock. The second one is the computer has to choose scissors. So now I can say console.log you win, like that. And we'll just keep it simple like that. Now let's check for the player losing. Else, if the computer move equals, I feel kind of dumb that I got to think about this. It's paper. Yeah, paper. There we go. So if the computer chooses paper, console.log computer wins, like that. And again, notice we're putting if statements and else if statements inside of another if statement. This is how you check for multiple conditions at once. And that's essential for making rock, paper, scissors, because we're having to check exactly 2 conditions at once to determine an outcome. So let's finish this out with an else. The only other possible move is if it was a tie and the computer also chose rock. So I'm going to say console.log tie with an exclamation point, because those look nice for some reason. All right, this is 3 possibilities. The player chose rock and the computer chose scissors, the computer chose paper, or the computer chose rock. These are 3 different possibilities for when the player chooses rock. And unfortunately, we got to do this 2 more times just to get the other the remaining 6 possibilities for this game. So I'm going to add an else if, and this else if corresponds to this opening if here. Else if player move, and I'll move a little bit faster now. If the player chooses paper, then we got to check 3 more times. If the computer move was equal to, let's see, paper, then the computer had to choose rock. Then console.log, you win, like that. Next one, else if the computer move was equal to what beats paper, scissors. I really feel bad that I have to think about this, but it's kind of late and I'm getting tired. There we go, console.log, computer wins. And last one, else console.log tie. There we go. So now we have 6 possibilities, a 3 for when player chooses rock, 3 for when player chooses paper. And now let's code those last 3 possibilities. And this video is actually almost done once I get these last 3. So if the computer move was equal to paper, that means the player won because the player's choosing scissors. And I know that because, of course, oh, do I really need to explain this? Most of my teaching is for younger people, so if you're an older person watching this, I'm probably over-explaining everything, but I guess you'll have to get used to that. All right, console.log, you win, quotation mark here, else if computer move is equal to rock, console.log, computer wins, else it was a tie. And that concludes, not necessarily this video, but that concludes the game logic here. Because we had the 2 steps, or we had the 3 steps. The player chooses a move, the easiest step. The computer chooses a move. We output the moves. Then finally, there's all the processing for the moves. And to make sure I didn't make any mistakes, oh, let me zoom out so you can see all of it and kind of check your work. Even that doesn't capture it all. Oh, there. I'm going to leave that open so you can check your work. And I'm going to run this. I'm going to type in rock. The player chooses rock. The computer chooses scissors. And I win. Okay, I'm going to run this several more times to make sure I didn't make a mistake somewhere. Player chooses paper. Computer chooses scissors. The computer wins. Of course. Alright, I'm going to choose scissors. Player chooses scissors. Computer, scissors. It's a tie. Let's do scissors again. I win. They chose paper. I'm going to do paper again. And that will be my last test run. I did not notice any mistakes. You can leave hateful comments below if I did. Player move, paper. Computer move, scissors, computer wins. And my brain is so tired that I'm like barely even comprehending that this is a correct outcome right here. If the player chooses paper, the computer chooses scissors, computer wins. I better stop here before I pass out or something. But that concludes my rock, paper, scissors tutorial, and I'm really excited to finish this one. So again, like I mentioned earlier, many of the next videos, are going to just be over improving this. Ideally, we'll get some kind of rock, paper, scissors button actually on this web page, and these messages will not just be in the console, but on the web page itself. And that's all stuff that I'm going to cover in future videos. And thank you for watching.